The Christmas card was simple, just red foil lettering over embossed paper, but I stared at it like it had teeth. You are invited to the Hart family Christmas dinner, hosted by Aunt Lauren, December 25th, noon. No RSVP needed, just a name on the back, Miles. For a while, I kept it tucked under a few papers on my desk in Portland. Not because I planned to go, but because I couldn't stop thinking about what it meant. After 7 years of silence, they suddenly wanted me there again. I wasn't sure which part made me more uneasy, the invitation itself, or the fact that my name had been written in someone else's handwriting. My name is Miles Hart. I'm 32, co-founder of a successful coffee chain called Elm & Cedar with 21 shops spread across 5 states. But if you asked my family, they'd say I still pour coffee. That's been the running joke for years. The family clown, the dropout, the guy who traded a finance degree for espresso machines and coffee grinds. It didn't matter that I helped build a multi-million-dollar business from nothing but grit and savings. What they remembered was a photo of me wearing a barista apron, especially my father, Caleb. He made it clear 7 years ago that I was a disappointment. Told me in front of my brother Brody that the family house would go to Brody when he graduated. He needs stability, he said. You're already fine on your own. I didn't argue. I packed a single bag and left without a word. And I never looked back. That was until I got the call. It was Aunt Lauren. Her voice was gentler than I remembered, tired but kind. Come home for Christmas this year, Miles. Everyone's missed you. Everyone. I nearly laughed. But that night I didn't sleep. Not out of excitement, but because I couldn't stop thinking, did they really miss me? Or did they miss the version of me who kept quiet, stayed small, didn't dare mention success? Still, something in her voice made me say yes. On Christmas morning, I made the quiet 2-hour drive from Portland to Salem. The sun was low, the roads half empty, and the air felt like it was holding its breath. When I pulled up outside Aunt Lauren's house, a place I hadn't visited in nearly a decade, I sat in the car for a full minute before opening the door. As I walked toward the front yard, a voice called out from behind me. Well, look who's still driving that old rust bucket. I turned. There was Peter, my cousin, standing beside a spotless white SUV, arms crossed like he owned the driveway. I offered a small smile. Still runs, gets the job done. He chuckled just loud enough for a few relatives near the porch to hear. Guess you really do work at a coffee shop. I didn't answer, just walked past him, gift bag in hand, some wine bottles, nothing fancy, and headed toward the house. Inside, everything was as I remembered: the holiday scent of cinnamon, Aunt Lauren's warm embrace, the oversized Christmas tree tucked near the fireplace, and then from the corner of the room I spotted them, Dad and Brody, standing shoulder to shoulder, not even pretending to acknowledge me. I stayed on the opposite side of the room, greeting people with practiced warmth. My father looked at me once, then turned back to his drink. I should have left, but I didn't. Not yet. Because part of me still wanted to believe that after all the years apart, someone in this house had changed. I just didn't realize how wrong I was, or that this night would turn into the very moment I finally saw them all for who they truly were, and that truth would break everything wide open. Dinner started off like any other family gathering: overloaded plates, overlapping conversations, forced laughter echoing off the hardwood floors. I sat at the far end of the long table next to a couple of my younger cousins who barely remembered my name. I didn't mind. I was used to it by now. The food was familiar: roasted chicken, garlic rolls, cream soup, sweet potatoes that no one could replicate like Aunt Lauren. But the air was thick with something else: expectation. A quiet tension crawling beneath the surface. It happened around the second round of wine when Uncle Andrew, Peter's dad, leaned back in his chair and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "So Miles still working that coffee shop gig?" His tone was light, like it was just small talk, but I knew that tone, the way his eyes gleamed, waiting for a reaction. He'd seen me once years ago behind the counter in one of my shops. It was a packed Saturday. 2 employees had called in sick, and I jumped in, apron and all. I saw him freeze in the doorway. I nodded at him, served a latte, and went back to work. He never said a word that day, but he said it now. I paused my fork mid-air. I could feel heads turning down the table. Waiting. I swallowed the frustration rising in my throat. "Yes," I said calmly, setting the fork down. "Still working at the coffee shop. In fact, I co-own 21 of them now." Silence. For 2 seconds. Then laughter. Peter slapped the table. 21. Are we counting Starbucks gift cards now? Someone else snorted. One of the aunts murmured, "Founder, but still in an apron." Sure. I didn't speak. Not because I didn't have words, but because I knew nothing I said would matter. I scanned the table. My father wasn't laughing, but he wasn't defending me either. He just stared into his wine glass like it held more answers than his own son. A knot twisted in my chest. That was the thing about being around family. They remembered you as you were not who you became. And some of them resented any version of you that outgrew their expectations. When the laughter died down, I said quietly, "It's true. Brian and I started the company 5 years ago. We've got shops in 5 states now." Another cousin added, "Yeah, but if you're so successful, why still serve drinks yourself?" I didn't answer that one. What was the point? They didn't want information. They wanted something to poke at, to laugh about. They wanted the old version of me, the Miles who failed to meet expectations, not the Miles who built something on his own. Then came the final blow. My father finally looked up. His voice was low but sharp. "You're embarrassing yourself. And us." There it was. The sting I remembered. It burned less now. Maybe because I'd already built a life without their approval. Or maybe because I'd finally stopped hoping for it. I stood up quietly, folded my napkin, and placed it next to my plate. "You know," I said, keeping my voice level, "I didn't come here to prove anything. I came because someone asked me to. But I can see now this was a mistake. No one tried to stop me. Not even Aunt Lauren, who met my eyes but said nothing." As I walked out of the room, I heard Peter's voice behind me, still laughing. "Guess you can take the boy out of the cafe, but not the cafe out of the boy." I kept walking. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. But I knew something had shifted. I had let them say whatever they wanted for years. But this time they would learn what it meant when someone who builds in silence decides to stop staying quiet. I hadn't planned to see them again. Not for a long time, maybe not ever. But life, as it always does, had other ideas. It was exactly 1 week after the Christmas dinner fiasco. I had just finished reviewing quarterly numbers in the office above our flagship cafe when my phone lit up. My father's name stared back at me. I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done. A minute later, a message popped through. "Your dad and Brody are at the Portland store. If you don't come, we'll keep showing up." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The decision was already made in my mind. I wasn't walking into that conversation as the son who needed their approval anymore. I was walking in as the man who didn't. 30 minutes later, I arrived. They were already sitting in the back corner sipping coffees they probably hadn't paid for. My father looked tired but forced his usual stern composure. Brody looked anxious, fiddling with the lid of his cup. They stood when I walked in, but I didn't extend a greeting. I sat across from them and said simply, "Say what you came to say." My father nodded like he had practiced this. "We were thinking," he said, "that maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones. You're doing well, clearly, and we're still family." Brody jumped in fast, too fast. "Maybe there's room for us. A stake in 1 or 2 of the stores, 10% each, or a location we could manage." I stared at them. No expression. Just silence long enough to make Brody shift uncomfortably. "That's not going to happen," I said flatly. "But we're your family," my father pressed, voice hardening. "You wouldn't be here without what we taught you." I laughed under my breath. "What exactly did you teach me?" "That love has to be earned, that mockery passes for concern." His jaw tensed, but he didn't reply. I stood up. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Their faces shifted, first shock, then anger, then something worse, entitlement. They didn't see it coming. 2 days later, Eric, our company's legal rep, confirmed delivery of a cease and desist letter. A no-contact order was filed. All communication had to go through my attorney. It was clean, legal, final, or so I thought. 3 days after that, I woke to a call from Clara, my assistant. "You need to see this," she said, voice low. "Your name's trending, and not in a good way." I opened my phone and there it was. A viral video posted in a private family Facebook group, but now screen recorded and shared. A heavily edited clip from the Christmas dinner. Just the part where I said I own 21 coffee shops, followed by my father yelling at me to get out. Overlaid text read, "Entitled barista lies to his family about owning a business gets exposed." But that wasn't the worst part. The caption underneath, posted by Brody Hart, my own brother. He had taken the worst moment of the night and twisted it into a public joke. For attention, for sympathy, for revenge. I sat frozen. Not out of hurt, though, that was there too, but from the pure, sharp clarity that snapped into place. They hadn't just wanted money. They wanted my story. They wanted control. They wanted the version of me that would forever be beneath them, grateful for scraps, desperate for belonging. And they didn't realize I had already walked away. I didn't call them. I didn't respond. I sent one message to Eric. "Send the second package, overnight delivery." That package contained something they wouldn't see coming. A formal complaint to the State Business Bureau citing public defamation and interference in a registered business operation. It was accompanied by a cease and desist renewal, this time with financial damages specified if the slander continued. The next day, Eric confirmed delivery, this time directly into their hands. Later that afternoon, my father called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You ungrateful little coward. You're trying to sue your own family. You're pathetic. You think you're too good for us." Then came a text from Brody. "You could have helped us. Instead, you turned your back. Whatever happens now is on you. No apology. No regret. Just blame." That night, I sat alone in the back of our newest cafe in Bend, Oregon. The floors still smelled like new wood. The espresso machine gleamed under soft lights. It was peaceful, clean, quiet, exactly the opposite of what I'd left behind. And yet, the ache lingered. Not for them, but for the illusion I'd held on to that one day they'd see me clearly. That maybe, just maybe, they'd say they were proud. I let that ache settle. I didn't fight it, I just let it sit there. Then I opened my laptop and drafted a public letter. I didn't name names, I didn't retaliate. I told the truth. I told the world that some of the loudest voices at the dinner table are the ones who never believed in you, and that you don't owe them your silence or your success. I hit publish, and in that moment I knew I wasn't just cutting ties. I was reclaiming every piece of the narrative they tried to steal. I hadn't planned to see them again, not for a long time, maybe not ever. But life, as it always does, had other ideas. It was exactly 1 week after the Christmas dinner fiasco. I had just finished reviewing quarterly numbers in the office above our flagship cafe when my phone lit up. My father's name stared back at me. I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done. A minute later, a message popped through. "Your dad and Brody are at the Portland store. If you don't come, we'll keep showing up." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The decision was already made in my mind. I wasn't walking into that conversation as the son who needed their approval anymore. I was walking in as the man who didn't. 30 minutes later, I arrived. They were already sitting in the back corner sipping coffees they probably hadn't paid for. My father looked tired but forced his usual stern composure. Brody looked anxious, fiddling with the lid of his cup. They stood when I walked in, but I didn't extend a greeting. I sat across from them and said simply, "Say what you came to say." My father nodded like he had practiced this. "We were thinking," he said, "that maybe it's time to let bygones be bygones. You're doing well, clearly, and we're still family." Brody jumped in fast, too fast. "Maybe there's room for us. A stake in 1 or 2 of the stores, 10% each, or a location we could manage." I stared at them. No expression, just silence long enough to make Brody shift uncomfortably. "That's not going to happen," I said flatly. "But we're your family." My father pressed, voice hardening. "You wouldn't be here without what we taught you." I laughed under my breath. "What exactly did you teach me?" "That love has to be earned, that mockery passes for concern." His jaw tensed, but he didn't reply. I stood up. "You'll hear from my lawyer." Their faces shifted, first shock, then anger, then something worse, entitlement. They didn't see it coming. 2 days later, Eric, our company's legal rep, confirmed delivery of a cease and desist letter. A no-contact order was filed. All communication had to go through my attorney. It was clean, legal, final. Or so I thought. 3 days after that, I woke to a call from Clara, my assistant. "You need to see this," she said, voice low. "Your name's trending, and not in a good way." I opened my phone and there it was. A viral video posted in a private family Facebook group, but now screen recorded and shared. A heavily edited clip from the Christmas dinner. Just the part where I said I owned 21 coffee shops, followed by my father yelling at me to get out. Overlaid text read, "Entitled barista lies to his family about owning a business, gets exposed." But that wasn't the worst part. The caption underneath, posted by Brody Hart, my own brother. He had taken the worst moment of the night and twisted it into a public joke. For attention, for sympathy, for revenge. I sat frozen. Not out of hurt, though, that was there too, but from the pure, sharp clarity that snapped into place. They hadn't just wanted money, they wanted my story. They wanted control. They wanted the version of me that would forever be beneath them, grateful for scraps, desperate for belonging. And they didn't realize I had already walked away. I didn't call them, I didn't respond. I sent one message to Eric. "Send the second package. Overnight delivery." That package contained something they wouldn't see coming, a formal complaint to the State Business Bureau citing public defamation and interference in a registered business operation. It was accompanied by a cease and desist renewal, this time with financial damages specified if the slander continued. The next day, Eric confirmed delivery, this time directly into their hands. Later that afternoon, my father called. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. "You ungrateful little coward. You're trying to sue your own family. You're pathetic. You think you're too good for us." Then came a text from Brody. "You could have helped us. Instead, you turned your back. Whatever happens now is on you. No apology, no regret, just blame." That night, I sat alone in the back of our newest cafe in Bend, Oregon. The floor still smelled like new wood. The espresso machine gleamed under soft lights. It was peaceful, clean, quiet, exactly the opposite of what I'd left behind. And yet, the ache lingered. Not for them, but for the illusion I'd held on to that one day they'd see me clearly. That maybe, just maybe, they'd say they were proud. I let that ache settle. I didn't fight it, I just let it sit there. Then I opened my laptop and drafted a public letter. I didn't name names, I didn't retaliate. I told the truth. I told the world that some of the loudest voices at the dinner table are the ones who never believed in you, and that you don't owe them your silence or your success. I hit publish, and in that moment I knew I wasn't just cutting ties. I was reclaiming every piece of the narrative they tried to steal. The public letter didn't just clear the air, it ignited a storm. Within hours, local media outlets picked it up, framing it as a story of small business resilience in the face of family betrayal. Some praised the honesty, others speculated about what hadn't been said. But for once, I didn't care about controlling every word. What mattered was that the truth, my truth, was finally out there, unfiltered and unapologetic. The next morning, my inbox was a war zone. There were support messages from former classmates, customers, even other small business owners who dealt with toxic family dynamics. But between them were familiar names, unreadable subject lines from my father Brody, and even Peter. I didn't open any of them. But then Aunt Lauren called. I answered on the second ring. "They're furious," she said without preamble. "Caleb's saying you're destroying what's left of this family's reputation. Brody's spinning some story about how you manipulated everyone." Her voice held both exhaustion and quiet support. "But I just wanted to say I read every word of your letter and I'm proud of you." That word "proud" landed gently but deeply. I hadn't realized how much I still craved it from at least one corner of that broken tree. "Thank you," I said, voice tight, "for everything. For standing up for me that day." "I should have done it sooner," she replied, "but I won't make that mistake again." She hung up before I could say more. Later that day, I walked into the cafe on Alberta Street, the first location, the one that still smelled faintly of the pine we laid down by hand. Brian was already there, wiping down the counter with controlled aggression. So he said without looking up, "Brody messaged me." I raised an eyebrow. "He said your reaction was disproportionate and that you've blown this out of context. Told me you were always the dramatic one." Brian finally turned, shaking his head. "You know what's dramatic? Posting a fake viral video to humiliate your own brother? That's drama." I gave a quiet laugh. "They really think I overreacted." He shrugged. "They think they're entitled." Still, that night I got another message from Brody. This time it wasn't about business or apologies. It was simple. "Hope you're happy, Miles. You've cut your own blood out for what ego?" I didn't reply. But his words sank in, not because they were true, but because they mirrored the guilt I had been taught to carry since I was young. Family was supposed to be everything, but when family became the knife behind your back, what did it really mean? I wrestled with that question for days. On one hand, I was relieved. There was finally silence. No more snide remarks, no more guilt trips, no more subtle threats wrapped in false concern. But on the other hand, something inside still grieved. Not for the people themselves, but for the idea of family I had chased for years. I thought of my mother, how she would have hugged me no matter what job I had, how she never would have let me walk out the door at 19 without a single goodbye. And that's when it hit me. Maybe family wasn't supposed to be a blood contract. Maybe it was the people who showed up when it mattered. The people who clapped the loudest when you succeeded and held your silence when you stumbled. I started making a list on a sticky note, nothing fancy. People who did show up. Aunt Lauren, Brian, Clara, who worked overtime fielding media emails, Luca, who printed out every supportive comment and taped them to the back hallway wall. It wasn't a long list, but it was mine. That weekend, Brian and I sat down to plan our annual founders' dinner for staff. Something simple, something real. We booked a cozy space in the back of the NE shop, catered it ourselves, and stood up to give a little speech at the end. I kept it short. Whatever happens outside these walls, I told them, this is the family that built something out of nothing, and we protect each other. That's our code. They clapped, some smiled, Luca even wiped a tear. Afterwards, Brian leaned in. Thinking of writing another letter, I shook my head. No, I think I've said everything I need to say. But that night alone at home, I found myself pulling out an old notebook. The same one I used when we first sketched the idea for Elm and Cedar on the back of a napkin. I flipped to a blank page and started writing, not for the world, not for my critics, but for me. Lessons I learned. Blood means nothing without respect. Silence isn't weakness, it's power when used with purpose. The people who mock you at your lowest rarely deserve a seat at your highest. Sometimes walking away is the confrontation. When I finished writing, I tore the page out and pinned it above my desk. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a reminder. I wasn't the barista they mocked. I wasn't the dropout they dismissed. I was a builder, a survivor, a founder. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything, not my success, not my pain, and definitely not my silence. I finally felt free. 6 months after that Christmas, my world looked different, not louder or flashier, but clearer. I still lived in the same Portland neighborhood, still made my morning cup behind the bar every Thursday. Elm and Cedar continued to grow, but this time I didn't hide behind it. I didn't shrink to fit into the version of myself others had created. I stood beside it proudly. I built this. I earned this. Brian and I had just closed a deal to open our 22nd location in Denver. He joked that we should aim for 25 before the year was out. I told him we'd see. No pressure. We were building at our pace on our terms. I no longer felt the need to prove anything. Not to my father, not to Brody, not to the distant relatives who still whispered from the shadows of the internet. Their silence since the legal notice had been absolute, and I'd come to cherish that silence. It wasn't empty, it was earned peace. On a quiet Sunday morning, I stood by the window of our Alberta shop, sipping an Americano from a ceramic mug. Outside, a line had already formed, local students, regulars who greeted our baristas by name. The glass in front of me reflected a man who had been through a storm and come out dry on the other side, not untouched but still standing. Aunt Lauren visited once a month. She didn't bring it up often, but sometimes over a shared pot of tea she'd say, "You know your mom would have been proud." And I'd nod. Because even now her absence was a presence, one that gave me strength, not sorrow. I didn't speak to my father or Brody again. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood that I didn't have to reopen a door just because someone knocked. Closure didn't have to come from them, it had to come from me, and it had. The most surprising change came not from business or media coverage, but from how I started showing up in my own life. I began mentoring young entrepreneurs, quiet kids with big dreams and small savings accounts. People like me 5 years ago. One of them, a 19-year-old barista named Sierra, pitched her plan for a mobile coffee truck. I listened, I offered advice. I even gave her a microloan through our new local brew initiative. Helping her reminded me, success isn't just measured in numbers, it's measured in impact. That's what I'd been missing all along. Not validation, but purpose. And the key lesson, that real power comes not from how loud you speak, but from how firm you stand. I had stood. Alone at first, but now I wasn't alone at all. As I left the shop that day, the sun hit my shoulders warm and quiet. No cameras, no drama. Just a man walking toward the next part of his life with both hands free. And for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing peace. I was peace. Story 2. Life has a way of blindsiding you. One moment you're 32, happily married, planning your future. The next you're a widow navigating a world that suddenly feels foreign and hostile. 6 months ago, my husband Daniel died in a car accident. The impact was so severe that an open casket wasn't an option. The days that followed were a blur: funeral arrangements, condolences, and an overwhelming sense of loss. My parents stepped in to handle most of the logistics, for which I was grateful. I was barely holding it together. In the weeks that followed, I found solace in a support group for those who had lost loved ones. Every Tuesday evening, I'd sit in a circle with others who understood the hollow ache in my chest. Sharing our stories became a lifeline. Daniel had left me financially secure: our suburban home, a downtown apartment, and a substantial bank account. I could have quit my job at the marketing firm, but the thought of being alone in our empty house all day was unbearable. Instead, I switched to part-time, just enough to keep my mind occupied. Surprisingly, my relationship with my parents improved. Growing up, I always felt like an afterthought compared to my younger sister Emily. They never missed her dance recitals or school plays, while my academic achievements barely warranted a nod. But after Daniel's death, they seemed to see me differently. When they asked if I could help them financially with a monthly transfer of $1 and $500, I agreed without hesitation. Weekly dinners at my parents' house became a comforting routine. Mom would cook her famous pot roast, Dad would pour the wine, and we'd talk about everything and nothing. For the first time, I felt like I had their full attention. Then everything shifted. Emily joined us for dinner one evening, 7 months pregnant. Her presence immediately commanded the room as it always had. She'd been living across town and I hadn't seen her since Daniel's funeral. "Emily, sweetie, sit here." Mom fussed, practically pushing me aside to make room for her favorite daughter. "Do you need another pillow? Are your feet swollen?" Just like that, I became invisible again. "So who's the father?" I asked during dinner, trying to join the conversation. "Have you told him about the baby?" Emily's face darkened. "That's my business," she snapped, pushing her food around her plate. "I don't need to share every detail of my personal life." Mom jumped to her defense immediately. "Karen, don't pry. Your sister doesn't have to explain herself to anyone." I couldn't help but notice how different this response was from when I was going through fertility treatments. Back then, they had no problem demanding updates and offering unsolicited advice. But how are you planning to manage on your own? I pressed, watching her heap seconds onto her plate. "Babies are expensive." Emily waved her hand dismissively, that familiar smirk playing on her lips. "Don't worry about my baby. We won't need anything from anyone. I've got it all figured out." I should have paid more attention to that mysterious smile. Emily was always cooking up get-rich-quick schemes that never panned out: the organic smoothie business that lasted 2 weeks, the life coaching certification she never finished, the cryptocurrency investment that lost her 3 months' rent. "Trust me," she said, patting her belly with an air of confidence that should have set off alarm bells. "This time everything's going to work out exactly as planned." Dad beamed at her like she'd just announced a cure for cancer. That's my girl, always landing on her feet. I took another bite of pot roast, trying to swallow down the familiar feeling of being second best. Some things never change. The call from Emily came on a Tuesday morning. I was at my desk reviewing marketing reports when my phone lit up with her name. I almost let it go to voicemail. Our conversations were usually brief and awkward, but something made me answer. "Karen." Her voice had that sugary sweetness she only used when she wanted something. "I'm having my baby shower next weekend at Mom and Dad's. I'd really love it if you could come." The invitation caught me off guard. The last real conversation we'd had was at Daniel's funeral, and even then she'd seemed distracted and uncomfortable. "Are you sure?" I asked, unable to hide my surprise. I could count on one hand the number of times Emily had voluntarily included me in anything. "Of course," she laughed, the sound oddly forced. "You're my only sister. It wouldn't be right without you. Plus, I have something special planned." Something in her tone made my stomach clench, but I pushed the feeling aside. "I'll be there." I promised, already mentally listing possible gift ideas. Maybe this was her way of trying to bridge the gap between us. The following Saturday, I arrived at my parents' house carrying 2 carefully wrapped packages, a high-end baby monitor, and a handmade blanket. Despite our differences, this was my future niece or nephew. The place looked like a pastel explosion had hit it, pink and blue balloons everywhere, streamers hanging from every surface, and a towering diaper cake centerpiece. Trust Emily to turn this into an event. She'd invited what looked like half the town. Aunt Margaret was there with her daughters. Mom's bridge club friends occupied the sofa, and Emily's old college roommates clustered around the punch bowl, giggling over some shared memory. "Time for games," Emily announced, wading through the crowd in a flowing maternity dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was glowing, but there was something predatory in her smile that made me uneasy. Her eyes kept finding mine across the room, holding my gaze a beat too long. We played all the traditional baby shower games, measuring Emily's belly with string, guessing the baby's birth date, and that horrible melted chocolate bar in a diaper game. I won the belly measuring contest, which seemed to irritate Emily more than it should have. Throughout it all, she kept shooting these strange looks my way, like she was waiting for something. After the gifts were opened, Emily cooing over each onesie and baby gadget, with theatrical enthusiasm she reached my presence. She held up the blanket, running her fingers over the intricate pattern, then clinked her glass for attention. The room fell silent, and my heart started racing for no reason I could name. The air felt suddenly thick, hard to breathe. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," she began, one hand resting on her swollen belly. "But there's something else I need to share. I think it's time everyone knew who the father of my baby is." My heart started pounding. Emily's eyes locked onto mine, and in that moment I knew. I knew before the words left her mouth, but that didn't lessen the impact. "The father," she said, her voice ringing through the suddenly silent room, "is Daniel Wilson, Karen's late husband." The world tilted sideways. Through the roaring in my ears, I could hear gasps and whispers from the guests. Aunt Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Emily's college friends huddled closer together, whispering frantically. But what hit me hardest was the lack of surprise on my parents' faces. They had known all along. Before I could process what was happening, Emily was already speaking again, her voice dripping with satisfaction as she turned to face me directly. As Daniel's baby is his only heir, I'm entitled to half of everything he left you. Karen, the house, the apartment, the money. My child deserves their father's inheritance. It looks like there was an issue retrieving the video transcript from YouTube, but no worries, you've already provided the full text earlier. Based on that, I've completed part 1 of a rewritten version in a clean, natural, and logical storytelling style. I didn't remember walking to my car. I didn't remember backing out of the driveway or driving home, but I must have. I found myself sitting in my garage, still gripping the steering wheel, Emily's words echoing like a gunshot I couldn't unhear. Daniel, my husband, gone for 6 months and now somehow at the center of a twisted claim I couldn't even begin to understand. My phone lit up as I stepped into the house, messages from Emily, dozens of them. Screenshots, photos, texts between her and Daniel. I don't love her anymore. You're the one I want. After the divorce, we'll finally be free. Each message hit harder than the last. Timestamps stretched over a year, all while I'd been going through fertility treatments, thinking I was the problem. Thinking we were struggling together. I wasn't even angry at first. I was hollow. My body moved through the house on autopilot. I picked up Daniel's favorite hoodie still hanging over the back of the chair and just stood there. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound in the house reminded me of him, or the version of him I thought I knew. The next morning, right on schedule, came the first call from our parents. My phone rang at 7:00 a.m., sharp like it was a business meeting. I let it ring. Then another call, and another. I finally answered the third one, not even sure why. Karen, my dad began skipping any greeting. You need to be reasonable about this. I didn't say anything. The sooner you agree to split the inheritance, the easier it'll be for everyone. For who, I asked, my voice flat. For Emily. For you two. For all of us, Mom chimed in. You don't want this to get messy, dear. When did you know? Silence. Then Mom's voice, softer now. He told us about 6 months before the accident. 6 months. They knew. They knew while I stood there sobbing at Daniel's funeral, while I handed over money to help with their bills, while I knit that blanket for Emily's baby shower. Traitors, I whispered and hung up. That same day, I canceled the monthly transfer I'd been sending them. Let them ask their golden child for money now. For 2 weeks, I ignored every call and text. I didn't leave the house. I had groceries delivered. Curtains stayed drawn. I needed space to feel everything. Emily sent an email, next legal language, formal demands. She was suing me. She claimed her child, Daniel's so-called only heir, was entitled to half of everything he left me. The house, the savings, the downtown apartment. She even named the baby Daniel Jr., like that would legitimize her claim. I couldn't process it, couldn't even rage. I felt like someone had cut the floor out from under me and I was still falling. At work, I broke down during a client presentation. My boss, Tom, one of the few people who hadn't treated me like a tragic headline, called me into his office. Take time, he said. Whatever you need, we'll be here when you're ready. I cleaned out my desk that same day, and then the court documents arrived. Thick, heavy, official. Her attorney laying out everything, evidence of a relationship, family testimonies, financial records. The whole disgusting story dressed up in legal language. I spent 3 days researching lawyers. Finally found one, Richard Martinez. Smart, calm, thorough, he didn't sugarcoat things. Ms. Blake, he said, scanning the documents, your sister has enough circumstantial evidence to suggest a long-term relationship with your late husband. The existence of a child paired with witness statements, including your parents, makes this a challenging case. And if it's not his child, I asked, you'd need proof, DNA or something just as strong. That night I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then a voicemail came through. Karen, this is Margaret Hayes. You don't know me. I'm Daniel's biological mother. I sat down. Daniel had told me his parents were dead, that he grew up in foster care, that there was no family to speak of. I called her back. She sounded tired but clear. I was at the funeral. I didn't say anything then, but I've seen what your sister is claiming and I need to show you something. We met the next day, a quiet diner near the edge of town. She looked just like Daniel, same posture, same sharp eyes. I hadn't spoken to Daniel in years, she admitted, but I couldn't sit back and watch you get destroyed by the same kind of lies he used to tell everyone else. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside medical records, Boston General Hospital, 10 years ago. Daniel had been diagnosed with complete azoospermia, sterile, permanently. He had known for years that he couldn't have children. My mind reeled. All those appointments, all the shots, all the tears, and he'd sat there pretending we were in it together. He was devastated when he found out, Margaret said quietly. I think that's when he started lying more. I'm not saying what he did was right, but I want you to know it wasn't your fault. I sat in my car for an hour after that meeting holding those papers. I couldn't cry. Not yet. But something inside me finally shifted. Something hardened. I wasn't just going to defend myself anymore. I was going to end this. The courthouse was packed. I didn't look for Emily when I entered, but I knew exactly where she'd be. Center front, flanked by our parents' baby Daniel Jr. in her arms like a prop. She wore a fitted black dress, hair pulled back, not a smudge on her makeup. It wasn't grief, it was theater. My attorney Richard had his briefcase in one hand and calm in the other. Let her perform, he told me. We'll stick to the facts. Emily took the stand first. She cried, spoke about her relationship with Daniel, said he had been the love of her life, that they were planning to start a family together, and fate robbed them of the chance. My son deserves his legacy, she said, eyes glistening. When Richard stood, he waited just a beat before saying, Your Honor, we would like to submit documentation that calls into question the paternity of this child. He handed over the medical records Margaret had given me. Daniel's diagnosis, his infertility, his permanent sterility. The judge's face didn't move, but the air in the courtroom changed. I felt it. Emily's lawyer objected immediately. Chain of custody, authenticity. It didn't matter. Richard calmly stated that the documents were legitimate, that they were from a major hospital, and that the simplest next step was to order a DNA test. That's when Emily lost it. They're fake, she shrieked, clutching the baby tighter. She made them up to steal from my son. But Richard didn't flinch. He turned to the judge and said, We'd also like to introduce a witness, Margaret Hayes, biological mother of the deceased. There was an audible shift in the room. Our parents turned to look. Emily froze. Margaret stood composed and unshaken. I am willing to take a DNA test to determine whether this child is my grandson, she said clearly. The judge nodded. DNA testing is ordered. We'll reconvene when the results are in. I could see the panic setting in behind Emily's eyes, but she said nothing else. 2 weeks later, we returned. The judge opened the sealed envelope slowly. The results conclusively show that there is no biological relationship between the child and Mrs. Hayes. Therefore, it is determined that Daniel Hayes was not the father of the child. Gasps, murmurs. My parents leaned away from Emily as if they had only just realized what she'd done. The judge continued, voice sharper now. Miss Thompson, do you wish to explain to the court why you made these claims? Emily didn't speak at first. Then quietly she said, I was seeing other people. But when Daniel died, I saw a chance. He had money, no family. I thought it would never be questioned. You defrauded your sister. You weaponized grief. I wanted a better life for my child, she whispered, but there was no weight to her words. The judge ruled quickly. All claims were dismissed with prejudice. She added that Emily should be grateful I hadn't filed criminal charges and that if I did, the court would support it. Outside, I didn't wait to be confronted, but they came anyway. Mom already crying. Karen, sweetheart, we didn't know. We thought she was telling the truth. Dad, quiet for once, stared at the pavement. We're sorry. I let them speak. Then I pulled out my phone, showed them the block screen, and did it again permanently. You made your choice when you backed her without question, I said. Now I've made mine. And I walked away. Margaret was waiting by my car. You okay? She asked, her voice low. I think so, I said. And it was true. Not perfect, not healed, but steady. Real. That week, I offered her the downtown apartment. It had too many ghosts for me, but she accepted only after I insisted. You gave me the truth, I told her. That's more than most people ever will. 3 months have passed. Emily sent a letter. No envelope, just a folded piece of notebook paper. I'm sorry, please help me. I shredded it without reading further. Mom left voicemails, then emails. I never replied. They didn't just hurt me with lies. They stood beside the person holding the knife. That kind of betrayal doesn't get patched over with time or guilt. Instead, I've built something quieter. I have dinners with Margaret. We talk about Daniel, not the version I knew at the end, but the boy she raised. We laugh sometimes. I didn't expect to find peace there, but I did. I'm back at work now. Back to long walks, baking again. I even signed up for a pottery class, something I've always wanted to try but never made time for. Some nights I still feel the ache of everything I lost, not just Daniel, but the version of my family I thought I had. But grief, I've learned, doesn't mean staying stuck in the storm. It means learning to walk through it, to breathe again when the wind dies down. It means rebuilding. I've lost a husband, a sister, and 2 parents, but I've found strength, clarity, a life that's finally mine. Not the one I planned, but one I can live in. And that maybe more than anything is enough. Story 3. I had been planning this trip for over 2 years. Every extra shift, every weekend spent working, every penny saved, it was all for this a week-long luxury vacation in Europe with my parents. I wanted to give them something unforgettable, a thank you for everything they'd done for me. The morning of our departure, I arrived at their house promptly at 6:00 a.m. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw my mom and dad stepping out with their suitcases. But then to my surprise, my younger sister Emily emerged from the house, luggage in tow. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. My mom smiled a little too brightly. "Oh, sweetheart, we decided that Emily should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately and really needs this trip." Mansion Global. I was stunned. "Instead of me, Mom, I've been planning this for years. I paid for everything. Widescribe plus 17, Prezi.com plus 17. Dreamstime plus 17. She waved her hand dismissively. "We appreciate it, dear, but you're always working so hard. You can take another trip later. Emily needs this right now." Emily didn't even look guilty. "Thanks for understanding, sis," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. My dad avoided eye contact as he handed me his suitcase. I felt a surge of anger and hurt, but managed to keep my composure. "Let's get going then," I said flatly. The drive to the airport was tense. Emily chatted excitedly about shopping in Paris, oblivious to the situation. My parents acted as if nothing was amiss. When we arrived, I helped them unload their luggage. My mom hugged me. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. This means a lot to us and to Emily." I nodded stiffly. "Sure, Mom." Emily beamed. "Thanks, sis. You're the best." I watched them disappear into the terminal, my chest tight with emotion. The ride home was a blur. I replayed the conversation over and over, each word cutting deeper. Once home, I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Then, without hesitation, I went inside, opened my laptop, and began canceling every reservation: hotels, tours, airline upgrades. They wanted to take Emily instead of me. Fine, but they wouldn't be enjoying the trip I planned and paid for. As I closed my laptop, a sense of satisfaction settled over me. They could explain themselves to the front desk staff in Paris. I was done being their doormat. The flight landed hours ago, and the call started almost immediately. My phone buzzed nonstop. At first, I ignored it. I poured myself a glass of water, took off the shoes I would have worn to the Eiffel Tower, and started unpacking my suitcase. I'd packed with care, imagining cobblestone streets and riverfront cafes. Now the clothes went back into drawers untouched. When I finally glanced at my phone, the screen lit up with missed calls and frantic messages. "Violet, the hotel says the reservation is gone. What's going on? Call me back now. This isn't funny, fix it." The last one came from Emily. Her tone was exactly what I expected, annoyed entitlement. "We're stuck here because of you. Do something." I read them all without emotion. Then I laughed, short and humorless. They thought I'd swoop in to save the day. After they hijacked the trip, I poured my time, energy, and savings into numb. Not this time. Eventually, I picked up a call just to stop the buzzing. "Violet," my mother snapped, "not even a hello. Why did you cancel everything? We can't check into the hotel. None of the tours are booked. This is a nightmare." I took a breath and calmly said I canceled them. Silence. "Then what? Why would you do that?" "I don't know. Maybe because you decided to take Emily on my trip without telling me." "That's not fair," she hissed. "She needed this more than you. You're always so busy." "Exactly. I'm busy because I've been working nonstop to pay for this trip. You didn't ask. You just decided." There was a long pause. "We thought you'd understand. You thought I'd keep letting it happen." I hung up before she could speak again. That night, I turned my phone off and left it on the coffee table. The silence in the house was strange but peaceful. No one demanding things, no guilt, no false gratitude. The next day, I opened my phone. More missed calls, more texts. Emily had written, "You're acting like a child. You ruined our vacation, just fix it already." My dad's message was more restrained. "This isn't right, Violet, please call us." None of them asked how I felt. None of them said sorry. Another call came through that evening. I picked up. "Violet, this isn't funny anymore," Mom barked. "Do you know how embarrassing it is to be turned away from a 5-star hotel in a foreign country?" I didn't even flinch. "Try saving for years and being replaced at the last second. That's embarrassing." "Stop being dramatic," she snapped. "You're punishing everyone over one decision that proved everything I've always felt, that I'm second place to Emily, that my effort means nothing." "You're overreacting," she said. "We're family." "No. You don't get to use that word to make me feel guilty." I hung up again. My heart was pounding, but it felt different this time. Not fear, not regret, power. The following days, I stayed off my phone. I worked, I cleaned, I made tea and watched the sun rise from my porch. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. 3 days later, I turned my phone back on. Dozens of new voicemails. First from Mom, her voice desperate. Violet, this has gone too far. We're back at the airport. The trip is ruined. Your sister is devastated. Your father is furious. Call us. Then Emily, you've embarrassed all of us. You're being insane. And finally, Dad, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us. Let's sort this out. Sort it out. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was years of being overlooked wrapped up in a final insult. That night, Grace dropped by with 2 coffees and a raised eyebrow. I heard she said, setting the cups down, "Let me guess, Mom called you." "Yup. Wanted me to talk sense into you. And I told her maybe you were finally learning to stand up for yourself." I smiled. "Not the sarcastic kind, a real one, thank you." "About time, honestly," she said. "You've been the glue in that family for years. No one noticed how much pressure they put on you. Except you did. And you finally cracked. In the best possible way." We sat for a while just sipping coffee in silence. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted. "That's the beauty of it," Grace said. "You get to choose, not them." She left and I sat alone, her words sinking in. For so long I'd been living on other people's timelines, meeting their needs, fixing their problems, and for what? To be treated like a travel agent, a wallet. No more. When the weekend came, I was ready to answer again. This time it was Dad calling. He started with a sigh. "Your mom wanted me to talk to you." I said nothing. "It's gotten out of hand, Violet. Your mom's upset, your sister's furious. This isn't like you." I almost laughed. "No, it's not, because I'm finally done letting you walk all over me." He paused, then tried again. "You're punishing the whole family over one decision." "One decision," my voice rose. "You replaced me, on a trip I planned. Paid for, without even asking. One decision that proves I'm nothing but a backup plan to you." "That's not what we meant. It's what you did." Another pause. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't need you to say anything," I said quietly. "I just need you to know I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not your fixer. I'm not your backup. I'm not your free ride." I ended the call. No yelling, no crying, just peace. And that was worth more than any vacation. When they finally came home from the wreckage of the trip, I was already parked in their driveway, coffee in hand, waiting. I don't know what I expected, maybe guilt, maybe some kind of apology. What I got was attitude. Emily was the first to speak. "Hope you're happy," she snapped, dragging her scuffed suitcase behind her. I didn't move from the porch swing. "About what?" "Our trip was a disaster." Mom added, her arms flailing like the whole thing had been a hurricane I personally summoned. No hotels, no tours, nothing worked. We had to stay in cheap hostels. I sipped my coffee. "Didn't you say Lauren needed the trip more than me? Sounds like a great bonding experience." "That's not the point," Mom said, voice rising. "You sabotaged us." "No," I stood, slowly setting the cup down. "I planned a beautiful trip for the 3 of us. You decided I wasn't invited. So I took the rest with me." Dad finally joined in. "You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. It was cruel." "Was it?" I asked. "Or was it self-respect? Why should I fund a vacation I was cut out of?" Emily rolled her eyes. "God, you're so dramatic. It was just a trip. Just a trip." My voice shook, not with fear, but the force of everything I'd buried for years. That just a trip was 2 years of skipped dinners, missed birthdays, working weekends, so I could give you something special, and you threw it back in my face without blinking. Silence. "I've been the one holding this family together," I said, "planning holidays, remembering birthdays, making things happen, and it's never been enough. You always chose her. Always." Mom opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Not this time. I'm done. I won't play second place anymore. You made your choice. I just made mine." I picked up my bag and turned toward my car. "Don't expect things to go back to normal," I added before driving off. "I'm not that daughter anymore." That night, the house was quiet again. I sat on the couch, blanket over my legs, cup of tea in hand. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt free. A day later, Grace called. "How'd it go?" "They're furious." Emily's pouting, Mom's playing the martyr, and Dad's confused. She laughed. "Let them stew." "I will," I said, and meant it. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. I started sleeping better. I had more time, more energy. I redecorated, new art, fresh paint, better lighting. My space finally looked like me, not some grown child trying to live inside her parents' expectations. One evening, I sat at my desk, pulled up the travel spreadsheet again. The plans for the trip still lived there, canceled tours, unused reservations. Instead of deleting it, I opened a new sheet titled My Trip. Italy had always been on my list, so had traveling alone. I didn't think I had it in me, but now I did. 3 weeks later, I landed in Rome. The air smelled different, like stone and sun and food that didn't come out of a plastic container. I didn't rush. I didn't stick to a schedule. I wandered side streets, ducked into cafes, talked to strangers. I sat alone on the Spanish steps with a gelato, wrote in my journal like I used to in college, and smiled to myself. Nobody interrupted. Nobody demanded anything from me. In Florence, I bought myself earrings from a street vendor. Not expensive, not fancy, just a quiet reminder I am worth the gift. On my last night, I ate at a tiny restaurant overlooking the Arno River. The wine was too good, the sunset too perfect, the pasta too rich. I let myself enjoy every second. That night, I opened my journal again. The page filled easily. Learn Italian. Start the small art shop I've dreamed about. Hike in the Pacific Northwest. Visit 5 more countries. Let go of guilt that was never mine to carry. Coming back home felt different. Not because I missed anything, but because I didn't. There were a few texts waiting when I turned my phone back on. Hope you had a good trip. We'd love to talk. Maybe we all can sit down soon. I read them, then set the phone down. I didn't reply. Not yet. Maybe not ever. A week later, Mom called. I let it ring, then picked up on the 4th try. Violet, she said quiet. We've been thinking a lot about what happened. Maybe we didn't handle things right. That's putting it lightly. You're right, she said. It wasn't fair. I waited. Emily's upset, but I think she knows she went too far. I sighed. It's not just about the trip, Mom. It's about years of this. Of you asking me to shrink so she could shine. I know, she said. We didn't realize how hurt you were, but we don't want to lose you. I'm not lost, I said gently. I'm just not standing behind you anymore. We'll do better, she promised. Then show me, I replied. Words aren't enough anymore. We hung up on a strange note somewhere between hope and distance, but I felt okay, because now I understood their change was not my responsibility. Over the next few months, I kept my boundaries. I replied when I wanted. I stopped rushing to fix things. I said no and meant it. I took a photography class. I joined a local hiking group. I started sketching again. And I planned my next solo trip. One day, sitting on the porch with Grace, I told her I'm not who I used to be. She grinned. Good, that girl was carrying too much. I nodded. That girl gave and gave. This woman, she builds, she rests, she says no, and she never ever forgets who she is.